Good morning.
Good morning.
Please tell me your full name.
Joel Thomas Schneider.
And where do you live right now?
I'm living in Omaha, Southwest Sarpy area. Grew up in Omaha, so I've been around here all my life.
Can you tell me where you were born?
Actually, in Omaha, St. Joe Hospital, when it was active. So.
What high school did you go to?
But I went to Platteview High School. It's near Springfield. And grew up in a small town called Platte, just south of Offutt Air Force Base, before you get to the Platte River there. Very small town, just one square block anyway. Pretty good childhood. Because of the area we lived in, did a lot of outside exploring, in the woods, and always had a lot of motor scooters, go-karts. I remember having one bicycle, everything else had a motor, so, yeah. So anyway, I really do. I had a pretty good childhood. I was a middle child of 5, and we all got along pretty good, so, everything. My dad was a World War II vet, actually wounded at Omaha Beach, and as a result, he drank pretty heavy, but he always was a good provider. Sometimes he'd have 3 different jobs to support the family, but he did drink quite a bit, and eventually, died of cirrhosis, and kind of runs in my family. My grandfather, died of cirrhosis. Then my dad's brother, he was a heavy drinker, eventually quit. And then myself, after I got home, I was a heavy drinker myself. But yeah, got through it. Got through it. Anyway. I remember during the year, now I actually went in 1969, and I remember during that time period, they was telling us that Vietnam, if the communists took over the South, there would be a domino effect, and it would start happening all over the world. And I thought, good grief, what a noble effort, to join and stand up for. So when I was 17, I wanted to go in. I had a couple of buddies going in, and I wanted to go in with them, and they was joining the Marine Corps, and I wanted to go into the Marine Corps. I was 17 at the time, and my mom and parents wouldn't sign the papers to let me go in. So I agreed to just, hang on, and eventually I was drafted, and I was, I think, 20 years old at the time. And when I got drafted, I remember going into the draft board, and there was 156 being drafted that day, and they needed 5 for the Marine Corps. 4 people volunteered, and they picked me. So I was actually drafted in the Marine Corps, which I wanted to go anyway. They found during the physical I had flat feet and a very high-pitched capability of hearing in my ear, which would be damaged easily, with explosions. So they give me a deferred if I want. I signed a release to still go in. So I did eventually wind up in the Marine Corps. Went in through San Diego, California, for basic and advanced infantry training. Pretty much after that, they sent us right on off to Vietnam then. And some of my memories, early memories of going in, there was 2 of us that we found out we was waiting for the helicopter to take us out to our company. And I ran into another guy, that was going to the same company, and we become buddies instantly, and decided we're going to stick together through thick and thin, and that type of thing. First memory of my company was they flew us out to the bush in the helicopter, and as I looked down, there were shot holes still smoldering from an attack that they had that killed a couple of people that we was replacing, so that was kind of, a realistic wake-up call, but we went ahead and one of the first things that they did in my company was when you're new, you walk point. In other words, you go up front, and you either learn real quick or you're not a problem to anybody, So anyway, me and my buddy took turns walking points, to start with. And I remember one day, I was pretty sure it was my turn to take point, and our squad leaders was arguing, whose turn is it really? And my buddy said, well, I'll just go ahead, and take it because I want to learn. And didn't get too far down the trail. I heard an explosion, and the god-awfulest screams and cries. And he had hit a booby trap and it blew off one of his legs. I believe he did live, so, he got out of there, he lost a leg, but he got out of there. That's kind of the way I looked at it. But anyway, the way my company worked is we would stay out in the jungle, in the bush, 24/7, and we would set up a perimeter, and we would dig what the Marine Corps calls fighting holes, the Army calls foxholes, but we would dig in a perimeter and just run patrols, ambushes, and listening posts and stuff out of there for about 2 or 3 days, and then we'd pick up and go someplace else. We never really come back to a rear area, maybe once a month, once every other month, for 2 or 3 days, and kind of regroup and do our paperwork, get resupplied and all that kind of stuff before we went back out. But it was quite an experience because I learned real quick the meaning of camaraderie, and how close we were. And I look back on it, and I kind of reflect on it today in some of the work I do with veterans, that there's kind of a connection, and I think it's an electromagnetic type even. I got a degree in electronics, and I kind of looked into it that way, but it's something we all miss, when we get out, and we seek it out and usually don't find it, but it's something, that is very special, it really was. So I know most veterans, when they get out of combat, that is the one thing that they do miss, and if it's possible to miss anything. Anyway, kind of moving on, I wanted to talk about some of my experiences. I think one of the things that really affected me most is one day I was second man back on point, and we got ambushed, and there was one of them that was running from one tree line to the next, and the point man's weapon jammed, so I stepped up and started taking his place under fire, and one of them run from tree line to tree line across, and I aimed in on him and put about 10 rounds, as he was running across in him, and he just kept running. And of course, they was pretty high on meth, most of them, so it isn't like you see on TV where you shoot somebody and they drop, but he did drop, on the other tree line, and the thing that got me to vote most was he looked like he was about 12 years old, you know, and I said, geez, you know, I'm not a killer, you know. It was kind of a wake-up call for me. The way I dealt with it is I volunteered to carry the radio, you know, and become a radio operator, and it was something that nobody wanted to do because your life expectancy in a firefight is 3 seconds because they want to take out the communications first, of course, you know. So, and I did experience that a few times. But that was the way I dealt with it because I could see the people I was helping, like with medevacs, you know, calling in helicopters and stuff like that. And I couldn't see the people I was hurting by calling in airstrikes and artillery strikes and stuff, you know. So it helped me to deal with it very well, it really did. Some of the other stuff, I actually did kind of want to address, if I can, you know, I wanted to try to address, I made a few notes here. I think there was a couple of incidences that really stuck with me, and one of the things that I try to spread now is that I felt being trained as a Marine, I had the best training, the best experience in the world to survive and function in a combat zone. But nobody told me there were kids. There were kids in war, and several times we'd get ambushed from a village as we was going by, and you'd go to return fire, and all you'd see were kids running around and, you know, old women. Anyway, a personal experience that happened to me, one day we was on a troop movement, and it was probably between 110 and 120 degrees. It was pretty hot, and we stopped to eat lunch by a river. Well, growing up where I lived, you know, was right where the Platte meets the Missouri, and had Hanson's Lakes there, and I love to swim. I always have. I was a swimming and life-saving counselor for the Boy Scouts and stuff. So anyway, some of us got in the water, you know, in the river to go swimming, and I just loved it. You know, I was having the best time. And the other guys got out, and I was there by myself. You know, I really didn't care about eating. You know, I just wanted to stay and swim. And out of nowhere, a sniper shot at me in the water, and the round just went in that close, in and out, just right in front of my nose. I dove down underneath the water, and it was quite a ways to shore. It was pretty wide, and plus the current, you know, I had to fight against the current and stay there, but I made it. And for some reason I remember thinking of the Tarzan movies where he's underwater and they're shooting at him. I don't know why that crossed my mind while I was underwater. It's kind of a funny thing. But anyway, I did make it to the shore, and I just kind of cleared off some of the shrubbery that was floating there to breathe, and eventually made it up to my pack. My pack was about halfway down the bank, and I didn't have my rifle with me. What I did have was a law, and that's just a collapsible, it's like a portable bazooka, you know, it's very deadly. Anyway, I spotted on the other side of the river where the sniper was in a little hooch over there, and he was firing away still. And I brought the law up, and I aimed in on it, and I was squeezing it, waiting for it to go off, and there was no doubt I was going to get him. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a little kid about that high come running in, and it was really weird. I kind of left my body. I just like I don't want to be here, you know. And anyway, by that time, some of the rest of my people come up on the bank and could see the sniper and what was going on, but they didn't see the little kid, and he was hollering at me to fire. Now, the log worked off of a battery, and it was electrical, and sometimes they would fail because of the humidity, and I just said it was a misfire and laid it down. Well, somebody come up behind me and picked it up and blew the hooch. With the little kid in it. And I never told anybody that he was in there. But my hesitation, the sniper was actually hit another one of us. I heard that he was just hitting the leg and he was okay. They medevaced him and stuff, you know. But, you know, I think about that stuff and later on in life, you know, the effect it had, and I never realized it, you know. It screwed up my decision making. And I remember when I got home, I could not make a decision for myself. It was a good thing that I had people around me, you know, that cared and I trusted, you know, and they helped me out, and that's how I got into the electronic school, and you know, went on to better my life. The other thing that happened was pretty significant. As a radio operator, one time we was catching fire pretty bad at our position, and I had one of our guys was shot in the head. He was still alive, and he was still talking to me, you know, but I had to get him out of there in a hurry. So I called in for the medevac, and as the chopper's coming in and landing, I could look the pilot in the eye. I mean, he was close enough to see where we were. And I screwed up. I said that you're at my 11 o'clock instead I'm at your 11 o'clock, you know. And I mean, we was taking fire, you know. I mean, it was a pretty volatile situation. Anyway, the pilot come back to me on the radio and started scolding me like I was a little kid, and turned around and flew away, and left me there, you know, with this guy beside me, and I don't remember what happened after that. I really don't. And there's been some things, you know, where I get to a point and wouldn't remember, you know, and I've talked to doctors before, and they said, just let it go, you know. That's your mind's firewall protecting you, you know. Maybe someday you'll remember, but so, you know, that's where it was. But later on in life, you know, I guess cause and effect, you know, I talked about how my decision making, you know, really screwed me up because I couldn't decide anything. And I did eventually get a job at a major electronics organization and was doing pretty good. Worked my way up to service manager and I covered Omaha, Grand Island, you know, Sioux City, you know, Lincoln, you know, pretty big. And but one of the things that happened was, as service manager, I had to start taking customer complaints. And it just, I would black out and all of a sudden find myself driving around the road. I don't know what excuse I used, you know, but now I was still drinking pretty heavy. I mentioned my uncle earlier, and through his influence he got me to quit drinking, and that's when I went in for help. And I didn't want to go to the VA because I'd been there before and it was a bad experience. So I went to the vet center. They had just started up, and when I went to the vet center, they diagnosed me with chronic and severe PTSD and told me there's no cure, and that really ticked me off. don't tell me I'm going to be like this the rest of my life, you know. So I did. I set out to find my own cure, and I did it through mostly education. I bought every book I could. I signed up for every program, you know, the VA and the Vet Center had, every group they had. I went into an extended program in Topeka, Kansas for PTSD, and there's also one in Des Moines, Iowa that I went through twice, you know, and as a result, you know, I am doing pretty good today, you know. So, you know, a clear message, you know, recovery is possible. Some of the other things going on that I remember, the most fantastic thing, I had some pictures we used to keep of, you know, the dead, we called them gooks and stuff, you know, and I threw them all away except for one, because it was an incident that happened to me. Now, we was set up in an area where the grass was only about that high, and it was a moonlit night. It was almost daylight out, you know, I mean, so we thought, God, this is great, because normally you would sit in a hole and you'd do what they called hole watch for 2 to 4 hours, you know, every night, you know, each person in a hole sitting around the perimeter, and you sit there and listen and try to watch. You listen to the silence and you watch the dark, you know, because they're going to sneak up on you and try to kill you, you know. They have what they call sappers, you know, that are very capable, you know, of sneaking up on you. So this one clear night, low grass, you know, open fields, we knew they wouldn't bother us then, you know, so everybody was kind of sitting up instead of standing in the hole and leaning back against their packs and just smoking cigarettes and everything, you know, said no problem. Well, a buddy of mine named Duncan, he was in the hole directly across from me, and he heard a thump. And he put his hands down to look to see what he did. And when he did, his right hand landed on Tricom, which is their hand grenade, you know, that had just been thrown in on him. So what he did was he threw it out, and just as he threw it out, it went off, and the concussion blew him down in the hole. He was still awake, and he grabbed a hand grenade himself, pulled the pin, and went to throw it out, you know. And as he was coming back, he passed out, and the hand grenade went inside our perimeter and exploded. Well, that kind of ended, you know, nothing happened, you know, from there. The next morning, a guy named Barry, now inside our perimeter we would dig holes about that deep to stay below, you know, in case we got hit. So we was all in sleeping holes, and Barry wore glasses, and he woke up the next morning and he's looking for his glasses, and all of a sudden he hits this dead gook laying there. This guy was already inside our perimeter with the low grass, with the high intensity of the moon, you know. It was just unbelievable how he made it in there. Anyway, interesting part of the story is I walked over because the body was laying out, pointing right at me. The rifle was in front of me, in front of him, pointing towards my hole. And I was the first one to pick up the rifle, and I dropped the magazine and I ejected the round that was in the chamber. And I stuck that round in my pocket, you know, and just went on around my business. Well, the funny part about it is, you know, this round, I would run into it every now and then, and, oh, here's that, I remember that, you know, and one night and this was just about 5 years ago, I got a little shop set up downstairs, and I found that bolt laying around again, and I thought, I think I'll just put a little hole in it and drain the powder, you know. I don't want that live shell around anymore. So I started to do that, and I'm looking at the bullet, and I look at the back end of it, and all of a sudden the hair just stands up in the back of my neck. I couldn't believe it, because the primer was indented. In other words, he had shot at me, but it was a dud. And I got the bullet. You know, right now I have it. I built a little stand for it, and I got it hanging on my mantle. But it was just incredible to me, you know, that he probably was shooting at me, and I had the bullet. But it was really just an incredible story, you know, the way that they got in and how skilled they was at that, you know. But one of the other things that allowed me to do as a radio operator was I worked my way up to company radio operator, and I had 4 operators under me, which was 4 squads, you know, each had a radio operator. And if you was on a movement or something and you got hit, you know, somebody needed to call in a medevac, it's whoever had the comm at that time. One operator would be designated that, or a lieutenant or a high-ranking NCO, you know, would take it. And as a result, I wouldn't have anything to do. Of course, everybody else had to set up, you know, and counterattack and all that. So what I would do is I'd always help the corpsman, you know, and one of the most significant things that happened one day, we was out humping with tanks, which didn't make sense to me. Tanks in a jungle, you know. Anyway, the only time I seen them shoot is to blow away a tree line so they could get through it, you know. Anyway, we was moving out with the tanks, you know, one day, and we knew they was setting up booby traps everywhere they go, right in front of them, you know, so it was pretty bad. Anyway, I was walking just behind a tank. The tank was like right here, and there was a squad over here, Dave Baker's squad, as a matter of fact. And I remember Dave was asked to get a point man, you know, appoint a point man, and he decided to do it himself because he had the best skill. And as he was coming through a tree line, I was watching, and he hit a booby trap that was meant to take a tank out, and it rolled up the whole squad, you know, all of them were down. So I went running over there, and Dave was the first one I got to. The corpsman was already there, and this is a little graphic, you know, but I mean, it's real. And on his right side, you know, it was squirting out blood, and the corpsman was working on that, and he hollered at me to get his brains out of the mud, because his head was split all the way in 2, and his right hemisphere was laying over here, and the mud was caused by the blood, of course. And so I had to pick up his head and put it back together and wrap it up. And we did put Dave on the bird alive. I heard he wound up in Hawaii in a hospital there, and eventually died there. It's funny, I've been to the wall like 3 times, you know, I couldn't remember his name. And then I was looking at some of my pictures, and I pulled them out, and I wrote their names down on the pictures, you know, so I was eventually, you know, got to see him. But anyway, you know, when we got Dave's table, I went through, you know, and I was working with some of the other guys, and I remember a big Native American guy, and of course we called him Chief, you know, was laying there, and he was shot, you know, right in the crotch area. Not shot, but, you know, kind of blown up, caught a lot of stuff there. And he asked me to look, you know, and I looked, and looked like hamburger, you know, and I told him, yeah, you're going to be okay. You'll be under white sheets tonight playing with yourself. Of course, you don't want to tell them the truth. They'd go into shock, you know. But, yeah, so there's some pretty severe injuries there. I think the other one that was significant with me is one day we was digging in, and Lieutenant Joe Burns, now, I was his personal radio operator. He was the platoon commander. And he was digging in, and he wasn't maybe 20, 25 feet from me, and he hit a mortar shell, and it blew him straight up in the air. I watched him. He went up about 10 feet and came back down. And of course the corpsman was there right away, and I was there too to help. And he was just tore up everywhere, bleeding everywhere. And it took me and the corpsman and another guy hanging onto his head to patch him up. It was amazing though, you know, he was still giving orders, you know, and talking to the NCO in charge, but I remember he said, "Look at my eyes, I can't see." And I looked at his eyes, and he had little tiny holes in them and stuff, you know. So, and anyway, we saved him, got him on the bird, and I've actually talked to him and met with him in person, you know, since then. And the corpsman had wrote me up, you know, for some kind of a life-saving star or something, you know. And I was telling Lieutenant Burns about it, and he pursued it, you know. And I guess what the corpsman didn't know, but it was life-saving from the perils of sea. Anyway, Lieutenant Burns got me a K-bar, which is Marine Corps fighting knife. And he engraved on it, "Because of you, I am."
It's beautiful.
So that was pretty special. Anyway, but there was several things, you know. There was a lot of downtime, a lot of quiet time where we could talk to each other, and that was always good. I think some of my earlier experiences in common. I think the first attack that we had, there were huge explosions everywhere, and we was in a bunch of trees, and trees were falling everywhere. And I found this huge crater, you know, from a bomb, and I jumped down in it, and I thought it was, you know, maybe mortars or something, you know, but I'm looking around, and all of a sudden I see this long object about that long and about this big around heading right towards me. So I'm trying to get up the bank, and the thing landed right between my knees as I'm going up, and I thought, my God, it didn't go off. And I turned around and picked it up, and as I did, it kind of burnt my hands, and I dropped it, but it was nothing but a big piece of shrapnel, and it had American writing on it. So this was a friendly fire thing, you know. It was an artillery strike on our unit by mistake, and one of the other things, you know, early on was I was second man back on point, and we was walking through a graveyard, and we walked into an L-shaped ambush, which catching fire from the front and the side, you know, we're getting crossfire. And the mounds that they use are round, because I guess they bury their people sitting up, you know, instead of laying down. So the only thing we had to hide behind was these little round mounds about that high. And somehow I wound up in that graveyard all by myself. Everybody made it out. And I'm returning fire, and as I'm returning fire, I run out of ammo. So here I am in the middle of this thing, you know, no bullets. I just had to hunker down and try to stay out of the way until they got me out of there, which they eventually did. But, you know, it was things like that. But I think probably the most unique experience I had in a firefight, we had been setting up perimeter for a week for this artillery emplacement that was on a hill, and we was running a patrol off of that hill, and we was crossing a big long rice paddy, and we was right beside the like the mounds that separate them, you know, and they're probably about that long and that high. And all of a sudden it was heavy open fire on us from a close tree line there, embankment. And it was right on me, you know. I was following Lieutenant, and Lieutenant ran out as he was firing at me, and I got down. Well, I had the rest of our patrol behind me, and I thought, well, this is great. I got a what called 106, you know, a recoilless rifle, you know. I could see the hill with us sitting there, so I knew this is no problem, you know. I'll just call in a strike, you know, and it's point blank for them. So I called in for a strike, and when you do, you have to adjust fire. So I looked up to see where the shot had hit, and as soon as I did, you know, there was bullets all around me, you know, and the mud was flying up everywhere, and I thought, good Lord, they got me pegged. So I crawled up ahead, you know, quite a long distance, and called for another shot, and I popped up, you know, to adjust fire, and there they are again. They're right on me. I'm going, my God, these people are psychic or something, you know. I was really getting paranoid, so I backed up even farther and went back this way, and called for a shot, looked up to adjust fire, and there they was again, all over me, you know. So I was really getting paranoid. I didn't know what to think, you know, and finally the first sergeant in our platoon crawled up behind me, slapped me in the boot and said, "Schneider, you dumbass, get your antenna down." It was sticking straight up. It had gotten bent when I got down, so I might as well have had a neon sign on me that says, "Shoot this guy and they'll stop," you know. But yeah, so a lot of interesting stuff, I guess, you know, and looking back on it, it was quite an experience. But when I got home, we landed, I believe it was El Toro Air Base in California. And as we stepped off the plane, for some reason I didn't understand what was going on in the country. There was a line of people out on the tarmac before you even got to the gate. And as we walked down and walked by him, I remember there was a lady an older lady wearing a green dress standing right in front on the left, and she spit on me and hit me in the shoulder. And as we walked through that line, you know, they was calling us names and throwing trash at us and stuff, and I didn't understand any of it, but the way I dealt with it was, you know, looking at my own experience, my own PTSD, what was going on in the country, you know. I kind of stepped up and become an advocate, you know, to try to change things. And I was one of the first members to start the Vietnam Veterans of America here in the Midwest. Our chapter number was 146, and they went by how many chapters there was, you know. So, I mean, today there's chapter 2,000, 3,000, whatever, you know, and the membership numbers, you know, are the same, you know, going up, and my membership number was 191. So I got involved pretty quick, you know, and I remember that I was, they had elected me president of the chapter, and we had like over 300, you know, and there were three things that I tried to get everybody to concentrate on. One was PTSD, two was Agent Orange, and three was the POWMIA, you know, issue, because we don't leave people behind. By the way, one of the bravest things that I ever did in Vietnam, I remember we ran into a big group of enemy, and we was outnumbered probably 5-1 easily, you know. So we advanced to the rear because Marines don't retreat, and to regroup. Anyway, when we did, we found out one of our guys was missing, and somebody said they seen him go down. So the lieutenant, you know, went to a couple of the squad leaders, and said, "Give me a volunteer to go back and look for his body," you know. And he asked, and the squad leader says, "I'll go." He stepped up, and he asked another squad leader, and the squad leader says, "I'll go," you know. He looked at me and he says, "Give me a radio operator," and I stepped up. So here we are, the three of us, and we're going back, to try to retrieve this body because we don't even want them to have that because of some of the things they did. Anyway, we got back quite a ways into it, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here he come running. He was alive and okay. Boy, was I glad to see him. Anyway, that's the way we was. We don't leave people behind, but we did with our POWs, and that was the one thing our group wanted to do something about more than anything. So I didn't really know what to do, so I knew we had two women that lived in Bellevue whose husbands were missing. One of them was Carolyn Standwick, and the other one was Kay Basilovic, and so I said, well, let's invite them and meet with them, and they can guide us and we can help them. And we really became quite a force when we got together. The Family League and the veterans, and we did quite a bit. I think as a result, they started having a POWMIA chair in every chapter of every service organization in the state. They started flying the POWMIA flag. It was at the time, the second most flown flag underneath the American flag, You just seen it everywhere. So we did a lot of parades, where we built cages, with somebody in it to show what was going on. A lot of speaking and engagements and stuff, So we really made a difference. It was really quite. And all this time, I'm still kind of struggling, but that's how I dealt with it. Stay busy and become an advocate. Anyway, Carolyn kind of dropped out, but Kay stuck together and helped us out for years. And we worked together for years. And finally in 1987, they sent her husband's bodies back, remains back. And his name was Mike Basilovic. He was a backseater on what they called a wild weasel. They would go in ahead of a bombing run and take out the SAM sites and the radar and stuff, Anyway, so now Kay at the time, she was alone and raising two small kids. She had a boy and a girl, and so it's pretty remarkable. She even sold her house a few times and went back to some of the embassies, trying to get answers and stuff. Tried to get back into Vietnam and they wouldn't let her. But she talked to a lot of, she was amazing. She really was. Anyway, they sent his body back, and Kay all the time, she was alone. She never dated. She was very faithful, and I was very protective of her. Anyway, after they sent his body back, and I believe it was in '87, she kind of loosened up and sat back. We kind of got away from it a little bit, and I heard that she went out with this veteran that I didn't care for at all, and we just went to a dinner or a show or something, so I dropped whatever relationship I had going or anything, and I asked her out. And it was kind of remarkable because all this time we worked together, we never even batted a romantic eye at each other, never even thought about it, But we got together and went out. Kay and I have been married now 23 years.
That's awesome.
So, and we're still active, we still do veteran issues and stuff, I won't get into that anymore. I'm probably about out of time, maybe. Yeah, but Yeah, and anyway, you know, some of the stuff we carried on doing, you know, and even right now, I'm working pretty hard on veteran suicide is at an all-time high, and giving a presentation at the Gretna VFW on Monday, as a matter of fact. And I teamed up, you know, with another group, the National Foundation of Suicide Prevention and Community Alliance, who have a presentation, and we're going to give that along with veteran issues, you know, and why veterans aren't seeking help and why veterans are killing themselves. Because I have compiled quite a bit of information in that area, so we're doing that. I also I volunteered at the VA, and for like 8 or 9 years I helped with groups at the PTSD unit, you know, at the VA, and I kind of got away from that, but I got into peer support, in the peer support program, and it has been quite remarkable, you know, the effect it has and how great it is and how we can help other veterans with it. And I actually taught peer support for the state of Nebraska for a few years, and then they got away from it and changed it and stuff. Well, Dr. Jai Supram at Community Alliance has developed his own peer support, which is excellent, and he invited me to help teach it, and I jumped on the opportunity. I see so many veterans groups, you know, getting together and just staying together, and this is us, and not getting out in the community, you know. So any opportunity I have to get connected in the community in this way, you know. So I've been teaching with Dr. Jai for quite a few years too, you know. So anyway, recently there's a national push going on to address veteran suicides, and it's called the Governor's Challenge. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but I have recently been asked to sit on it, have a place at the planning table, you know, and I took the opportunity instantly, you know. I think we can make a difference. So the fight goes on, you know, it goes on.
Mm-hmm. Well, Joel, I want to thank you for sharing your story. I had wrote down some questions because I never wanted to.
Oh, sure.
To stop you, I wanted you to share your story, and then I made it right down.
I'm sorry, I got a habit when I start talking.
Oh no, that's fine. You know, I want you to
up.
continue to talk and share. And I wrote down 2 things. So you got your degree in electronic.
As a electronic technician. So it's like a technical degree is what it is.
After you left the service.
Yes, and
okay.
I used my GI Bill to
I was going to
do
ask,
that,
do you use your GI Bill? Okay.
Yeah. And I was guided into that by like a friend of my family and my family, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to do, said, this is what you do, and I did it, you know, so. And I'm glad I did, you know.
Yeah.
I'm glad I did, you know.
Because, yeah.
Yeah, I actually worked as a technician for quite a few years, and
right.
then I got away from it, and I got interested in locksmithing. I was just fascinated with it, you know. So I did that for, you know, the rest of my time working, and my specialty is cracking safes, you know. So I got the ears, you know. And
wow.
I don't file my fingers, but you know.
Very nice, very nice. Okay. Well, that was one, and then I wrote something, but you'd answered it down, and so is there anything else that you want to put on?
Oh, I don't know.
You've shared a lot, and I appreciate all of it.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you guys are doing. I really do. This is so important to do. It really is, you know. So right now I'm running around encouraging other vets to get in here, you know.
Yeah.
So, and when I do the presentation on suicide prevention in the Gretna VFW, I will mention, you know, and
Yeah.
I'm going to have a table, you know, for people to sign up, you know,
that's
and get their
nice.
information and stuff. So hopefully we come up with some more for you.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn this off.
Sure.